Corey Smith and Russell Sickles, and my friend Sean Dennison from Maryland. And I just wanted to, I was thinking about this. We spend a lot of time on the road, and we run into so many great people that do great work, right? And I'm amazed that against all odds, some people just do this just fantastic work. And I think that one of the kind of the Griffin-Hammis magic is to build relationships with these people and give them a little recognition, and we share work and everything. And I was on a call yesterday with a southern state, to remain nameless, where I have two friends, and the funding is just not working, right? It's not working. And over the last year, these women have developed 3 incredible jobs. They've followed the process incredibly, right? And the breakdown between what VR is going to fund and what DD is going to fund. And I'm just so proud of them. And then across the country, Griffin-Hammis, we have so many people that do such good work that I think, they need some recognition. They need a raise. They need a lot of things. So I want to kind of start telling their stories. And then we did a dry run on this, and we had a lot of fun. So I'm going to have Russell talk a little bit about, if he remembers what he said last time about, this perception about being a craftsman and practicing a little bit. And then we're gonna interview Sean a little bit. So Russell, you remember all that genius laid on us a couple weeks ago? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, not really, but I'll do my best. So one of the things that we're discovering, and a kind of apt name for that, is as customized employment becomes, has transitioned from kind of something that people are doing to adapt when maybe supported employment wasn't working, to being named as a methodology for the first time by the DOL in 02, roughly 01, to then 14 years later, roughly, being put in the WIOA, the Rehab Act, as part of the Rehab Act under supported employment. I think what we're learning is that it's a pretty complex skill set. If you think of all the stuff we're asking people who provide the service to do, it's pretty complicated, and it takes practice. So one thing that at Griffin-Hammis that we've recognized and we're trying to change and develop is that it's not enough to go through like a 40-hour acre training. You need to practice it. You need to implement it, right? And the crux of CE isn't in the wonderful ideas, like employment first and all means all, which we all agree with wholeheartedly, but that a lot of that language can be really incomprehensible to people without. It's like a nice slogan, but it's really meaningless if it's not useful for people on the ground. And so through that, I've been thinking, about I can't, if the state puts out a bid to build a bridge, right, or a community building, I can't just go read a book, take some online classes and and then submit, right? That there's this expectation that with any kind of skill set that takes practice, that treat it somewhat like a craft or a profession that takes practice. So like for us, Corey, our one of our heroes was an engineer, and that's something that, there's book learning, all that, but then there's also the doing of the thing, that where the real value in learning happens. So we're shifting a lot more into like the field work. I call it the field work practicum, which is a bit redundant, but this idea that along with a 40-hour acre, you have to have some kind of mentored implementation practice. And as states are moving towards, well, you need to do it one time, then you're on your own. I think what we're recognizing is that one time is not enough. That you need to do this repeatedly to learn them, to be exposed to different scenarios and uses of problem-solving methods, different skills. Just like every individual's unique and different, so that you're going to be exposed to one path, but then the next person may present a completely different path where maybe some different pieces of that skill set is needed. So I think it's part of. We've devalued direct support workers. One of the jokes I've always made, I hope this isn't too offensive, is in our world, you get the most status and the most pay the further away you get from people with disabilities. I mean, the least time you spend with people, that's the highest status you have. And so I love this concept, Corey. I hope it's something we can, not just like tooting your horn here, but this idea of stories from the road. That is, I mean, for all of us, Corey and I and all of us that do consulting, we hate the road, right? The road is horrible. It's brutal. It's rough. You're away from your family. You're not in your own bed. But we also love the road. The road it's the work. It is meeting new people, being in their living room, in new communities. Just you see the variety of genius and the contributions and capabilities, competencies everybody has to offer. The problems and barriers and challenges that people can solve for themselves with a bit of knowledge of maybe some new tools. And we, like Corey said, we meet geniuses. We meet people, like Sean and others who are doing the real work, if that makes sense. Everything that Corey and I know these days is through people like you, Sean. We spend time with you. We watch you as you're doing great work, and the stories that you create are part of creating. Helping people kind of create their own stories, but facilitating that is what really, I think, impacts and makes community change. So yeah, I just think that we need to do a better job of highlighting, people who are doing the hard work and avoid the as much as possible the disability industrial consultant complex, of us, like us people, like us consultants being like, you should do this, and then I used to be like, yeah, what, then you leave and you're comfortable wherever you're at, and you tell me I need to do something, and if it doesn't work, it's always my fault, of course. So we need to highlight the people who are doing the work and help them share what they're doing. So I appreciate, Corey, I appreciate the idea. I think it's a brilliant idea. We're not doing much road work these days. We need to, that's what I'm missing that. My kids would tell you they wish I'd go on the road a little bit more, these days, but hopefully we can get back to that soon. So
great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's introduce my friend, John Dennison from Maryland. And I had a couple years ago, I walk into this, I think it's an old state hospital. It's like a gym, and it's really loud and it's cold, but it's great. And there's this guy sitting, and it was a pretty fun group, but there's this guy, like, he's just getting it, right? For every 2 minutes, he's like getting what's going on. And then Sean and I have become fast friends. And like the next day he's emailing me, and he's doing a community action team, and he's got this idea, and he's doing all this stuff. And so Sean, I want to start, with discovery. We're going to start with, who is Sean? Tell us a little bit about yourself. And people kind of relate to some of that, right?
All right. I grew up in a small town in Western Maryland, Frederick County. Let's see, we moved from Huntington, West Virginia when I was 2 years old. Hello, West Virginia. Both of my parents were teachers. Grew up public school guy. Went to public University of Maryland, went to school for English, of all things. Had every intention of being a movie director when I grew up. Have been playing music since I was in 6th grade, trumpet, French horn, and bass primarily. Jazz is my main thing. Started working for Frederick County government as what they called a vocational training instructor.
Wasn't that after Hollywood kind of bombed out on you?
Pretty much. It's like, well, maybe not. Let's not do this. But it was, a way to get involved in something and, pay some bills and do some things. I had been in computer graphics a little bit before that, and that was a bit overwhelming. So I started as a vocational training instructor, for Frederick County, working with developmentally disabled adults. So that was 1989. So 30 years later, after seeing all manner of things go through through our organization, through the system, and the people that we supported and served, the best thing to come around was, and I knew about it thanks to a good group, good network of friends in the field, the whole concept of discovery and customized employment, and then getting that, the certification through Griffin-Hammis, and it is the best work that's happened so far. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. And this kind of work just, it is so fulfilling in so many ways. So that's me.
Great. So how is customized strategies changed your approach to helping people get to work?
This is interesting. And I remember years ago taking a database management course. And one of the things they tell you about anytime you're going to write a database, do all of your work ahead of time. Do all of the work, and get pencil and paper out, write out everything, take in the questions that people have, your output and things like that. Get all the work done before you even begin to think about coding. And I relate it to this because it's a similar in process, that you do all the work ahead of time, and then by the time you've gone through all the elements of discovery, you really get to know that a person's like inner genius. You get to know who they are, and then you can start the job development work, the customized work, getting that perfect match. So that's probably the best comparison, doing all the work ahead of time instead of the old way. And we've, probably everybody on this call has been through it, where, you find an application to CVS, you fill it out and you pray. Or you fill out 50 applications for one person. You haven't really taken a look at them. But this, and the first official person that I took through the process, the results could not have been any better. So you have that solidification of the process working as well as it does.
So Sean, if you don't mind, we throw the term around, honorary mayor, and we've had some conversations about the idea of doing the cold call versus getting the warm call. And can you talk about maybe some of your strategies using what we'd call, social capital and maybe some economic capital from your own connections? I would think we'd call you kind of an honorary mayor of your county, and then
sort of.
and some of the maybe organizational capital you've been able to use to connect to make that warm call.
Oh man, where to start? Every opportunity, and I'll use a music. One of my musical mentors said, every gig is an audition for another gig. So everybody that you talk to, if you get to, you just ask a few questions, and then you do, a level of listening, a lot of listening, you can get to know people, and you get to know their connections. They get to know you, they get to know what you're about. And it starts, and it actually just, exponentially can go from there. So you build these things not necessarily with the intention of getting somebody employed, but getting to understand your community a lot better. It's a lot better than a cold call for me. I mean, although I've done that before too, where, you're calling, you're making phone calls, you automatically sound like a salesperson. So, you're not going to get any sort of warm response from that kind of thing. So you start working with the people and then the people they know, and what they do, and what they can bring to the field. So,
right. So can you tell us a little bit about Kyle's story and kind of getting on the community action team, and like how did you come up with like 12 people to be on the team?
Kyle and I've worked with Kyle couple of years prior to the Griffin-Hammis training, and Kyle and I just had a really good working relationship. He worked sheltered part of the organization that I was in, doing mailing work, doing various things, and we just had a really good relationship. And then after the training, we figured, because I know him pretty well, let's start the whole process. So brought together initially a meeting with his case manager, his mom, and himself and me, and started, explained what we were going to be doing, explained the process, explained, the expectations, his part in it, the family's part in it, that kind of thing, and started taking names of people who have his best interest in mind. So because that's absolutely essential. So that conversation continued on for a couple of days, actually, just between Kyle and I. And we started talking about family members. We started talking about people that he runs to and, runs into the, community, people that he has played sports with, that kind of stuff. And I started taking these names down, like I said, family members, community contacts, things like that, and sent out an email to everybody explaining what we were doing with Kyle, and was overwhelmed by the response, the level of positivity. And like I said, Kyle, one of the things I wanted to do from the beginning is keep Kyle, completely involved in this. And it fit his personality because he wants to be involved in what happens to him. So it was really great in that capacity. So we were able to find, quickly get 12 people together to, kind of come together and start talking about Kyle. One of the things that we incorporated for that when we scheduled it was not only food, which was outstanding, but we incorporated the vocational themes mapping process with the entire group. It could not have been a better experience for everybody involved, because once the tip of the iceberg starts to melt, everybody else just contributed to it. So it was an avalanche of information, with Kyle and all his, support. Yeah, I don't even want to call them support people because that's wrong. People who had his best interest in mind. So it was spectacular. This is funny because I know that both of you know this through my description of this. A visit to the home for Kyle wasn't going to work because, and I talked to both Kyle and his mom, and I think it was July when we started the conversation. She said, "I'm taking care of my elderly mother and my Christmas tree is still up. I'd really like not to have a visit to the home." So instead of that, we had a really great conversation, the three of us, where we just talked about what Kyle's like at home, what he does, what things he likes to do, what he does when he goes out, what he does when he goes outside, various activities and things like that. So that served the purpose. So the initial part of discovery, we weren't able to get, the true visit to the home like that, we had talked about.
So if I recall, in his case, that he had a big health scare, and you kind of really lost some ground. And can you talk about maybe that, the tenacity it took, and then that feeling about somebody with a more significant disability, that whatever that that value of that person being in the right job and sticking. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. When Kyle was 14, I started working with him when he was 25. When Kyle was 14, he had a bicycle accident that left him with a very severe traumatic brain injury. He ended up graduating high school, middle school and high school from Kennedy Krieger in Baltimore. So what that had left him with is a pretty severe seizure disorder, as well as memory processing. So those were the two main components of his disability. But he was left with a lot of cognitive abilities, especially when it came to ordered number, logistics, making sure things worked in a routine, etc. So that was Kyle's disability. So like I said, we met initially with the family, got this whole thing started in July and August, and by September, October of that year, started noticing increased seizure activity, and he was essentially off the discovery list for about 4 months because his seizure, when they balance seizure medication, they drop, and that kind of thing. So it's trying to achieve some level of balance. So with Kyle, I mean, he became combative, he became confused, he would be really tired, or he'd be very amped up. So we had this vacillating amplitude of his personality. So we decided just to put it on hold until he got through the medical process of getting the seizure meds together. And I have to tell you, from an organizational standpoint, just keeping, like you said, Corey, the tenacity to keep this going, because it was very easy for people to say, look how he's behaving, he shouldn't be a part, I can't believe that. So yeah, we took a lot of heat for putting it on pause, because some people looked at it behaviorally and said, he's obviously showing you that he, doesn't want to have a job. No, no. So that took about 4 months out of the process itself to get him medically stabilized. And but we really used that time to start gathering information from employers, our county government being one of them. So we got a lot of information during that time, but not directly related to Kyle. So
can you talk about his themes a little bit?
Yeah, his primary, and I've already kind of mentioned his themes, like logistics and numbers. But the other one that shocked us, it didn't shock me so much, but shocked our employment team, was entertainment, because the guy's really, really dryly funny. So he had this entertainment part and this logistic and number part. And to show you how much I remember, I don't remember his third one, because the first two were really who I saw as Kyle, and who the whole, Kyle saw in himself, especially the logistics and number parts. We're talking about a guy who, for his downtime, does Sudoku puzzles, likes long division, multiplication, likes to figure these things out, does his family's taxes, orders receipts, just that kind of thing. And it seemed to be this touch, that part of his brain that wasn't touched from the traumatic brain injury, that he seemed to find a lot of solitude and happiness with.
So, a lot of us have gotten stale calling this job carving, and Russell's been real big about, job carving just seems a little stale. So using a negotiation strategy, can you talk about, all the skills that you learned and how you went into, and what I said before is my bias is I've been in this a long time, and I'm a teacher's kid too, but I'm really, really comfortable in the private sector. I can walk in anywhere and negotiating. But I don't know why. I avoid the public sector. I just don't see the jobs there. But can you talk about, all the walking through with the county, and I think job requires work from about 4 or 5 different departments that you negotiated, and kind of how you.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. I will say this beforehand, before the whole process started, the only job that Kyle had ever had private was he was a dishwasher. But one of the most interesting things and funny things about him as a dishwasher was that he never saw it as washing dishes. He saw that process as inventory. He was taking inventory of knives, forks, spoons, plates, trays, and things like that. He didn't see it as cleaning. That was just a process to get to the inventory. But flashing forward to working with the county, we had a bit of an advantage, because the agency I work for is a pseudo-county agency. So it is so nice to have people in your corner in a public sector, people that know what you do, know you, can recognize what you're trying to do. Now, we were introducing something brand new to the county, the whole idea of customized employment, the whole idea, too, of having somebody perfectly suited for whatever unmet needs that we would discover. When we were talking to the various, division directors and department directors, you ask those questions, okay, that's great. What does a fiscal clerk do? Let's see that job description. Now, is this being done? Just basic questions, getting the conversation going. But the initial part of it was, I was fortunate enough to get every division director in Frederick County together in one area. They gave me 15 minutes and to present the entire case for discovering customized employment and how we were doing the work. So you're talking about everything from like a Department of Public Works to the library, to the health department, citizen services division, everybody all in the same room on one of their monthly meetings. And I think that's when we really made connection.
Cool. So it's a good transition. One of the things, a wonderful transition, I think, to you're presenting something to somebody who doesn't know what you're talking about, right? Customized employment. I think intuitively, we think that employment happens one way. We call that like the demand approach. Hire you hiring, applications, interviews, resumes, which we know. I think the real world doesn't really work much like that for a lot of people, and for a lot of the folks that we may be working with in customized employment, that approach is unlikely to be successful. One of the things that one of the things, and this is kind of selfish for me, as because where I'm at with some of my projects, and something I think Corey probably could agree on, and maybe you too, Sean, is that in terms of talking to new people, opening doors, expanding the message, the personal, professional, and business network. What I find is that whether it's during discovery, when you're doing informational interviews, or during customized job development, that's a real challenge for employment career counselors.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, it's selfish because I'm having a number of conversations with some projects right now about individually, personally. I think you're well positioned anyway because of who you are and kind of your multiple roles. But what do you think that the organizations can do or individuals can do to help themselves to support opening, what we hear, like, well, they're not picking up my phone call, and like it seems like cold calling is like the first, like, we don't know how to maybe make sure that's our last option, if that makes sense.
It's really interesting. So early on in this, I was talking to our director and some of our management staff and saying, you need to really get to know your own staff, know the strengths of your staff, do those observations you might otherwise do with some of the people, some of the individuals we support. Really getting to know the strengths of your staff, because all too often there's somebody in a role of job developer who is scared to death of talking to people, and that's just not it just doesn't work like that. So recognizing your own staff and being able to, and it's difficult, I get it, to move staff into positions where they will thrive because of their personality type. Some people are very outgoing and can start a conversation with just about anybody. Just finding out who those people are.
Cool, great. And then in terms of like business, like organizational connections, how do you think? Any idea? And again, I know if you don't have tons of experience doing that, but just ideas from what you've seen, impressions from the road, when you're out there doing things that were helpful.
As far as like you're talking about organizational.
Yeah, like executive directors, boards.
I feel. And Corey knows this, I feel really fortunate to be friends with a number of people in Maryland who have either run organizations or work for very successful organizations. And believe me, when you reach out to these folks, they are more than willing to tell you their story, to tell you, what they did right, what they did wrong, a better way to do something. Everybody, at least, that I've spoken to, is more than happy to share their stories. And I think that really helps. That's always been a part of even, my first days on the job, is getting to know how other people are doing the job they do. So in that, you build that network with, by default through other, with other organizations.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, I don't know why, Sean, we've had some organizations we worked with where they, some people, the questions, we have a survey. Did you get any help in the organization? Some people say, my boss would know how to pronounce the word employment, but other places you can't be a member of the board until you've developed a job, right?
Yeah.
So with your music background, how many doors does that open for you with people? And
it's opened many doors. It starts the conversation. Like I said before, no matter who you talk to, that person, whoever you talk to, is going to be connected to other people who do all kinds of different things. So conversation starters, with me, with music, that has been a big conversation starter.
So I know, we laugh about jealous about you've got the guy who can take home a case of beer every shift. Can you talk about some of the stuff you've learned and bits and pieces you've used with other people?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the guy you're talking about, working with one of the breweries here in Frederick, and his was not a full-fledged discovery, but a good bit of customization as far as like what needed to be done. So his after talking to the manager and the human resources manager there, Got a feel for, got to go see. It's really nice being in a brewery, by the way. Get to see the ins and outs of how they work and watching and how they do their packaging and things like that. And then asking those questions about, where are some of your like sticking points? Where are things not getting done? Where do you need help? And being able to work with Josh, in this case is his name, to get involved in. He helps pack variety packs of Flying Dog beer, and just understanding what his skill, ability, and interest is, the type of people that he likes to work with, and then seeing the type of work they do and saying, hey, what if somebody came back there and instead of 3 people on the line, what if you had 4? And then finding out that this makes it work much more efficiently. Cool thing about that, talking from somebody who's, I'm in my 50s, almost, I would say 90% of the people who work at the brewery are all in their 20s or 30s. And one of the things I noticed was the incredible acceptance of Josh with, his disability status. I mean, I don't even like to call it that, but just how welcoming they were. And I always attribute it to, both my parents, again, being teachers, having students with disabilities in the classroom. It's not shocking. They're not treated, like super special, but they're not treated like, oh, they can't do anything. It just kind of fell in line. They, Flying Dog, like I said, the people on the line in their 20s were, already like, bottling beer and then smacking him on the back of the head or something like this, and going, they just welcomed him in a natural way, not in a, one of those, oh, he must be the nicest, that kind of thing. No, it's really cool to see that with the younger generation.
Huh. And so your interpretation of that is that, like, what we call mainstreaming.
Yeah.
Has that had maybe a cultural or kind of
I think
impact?
So, yeah.
And so it's not special, in terms of. That's really cool.
It is, and it was and you see this with other people in the jobs that they have. I'm noticing, and maybe it's because I'm focused on it, but noticing how younger people in their 20s and 30s, they're used to this. This is fine. Even somebody with some physical tics and things like that, no big deal. So I know that Kyle, for example, really worked out well. There was another part-time person working in the same office as Kyle, and he was a teacher, during the school year, but then he would come in and do some part-time work with the county on the off, and it was wonderful because, Kyle having the seizure disorder, we had to educate everybody around who worked with him, on just the protocol for, if he's having a seizure, what to do, the seizure first aid. But man, again, just the networks of people that you get to meet along the way and get to talk to and get to hear from and keep connections. It all really counts. It is the audition for the next gig in many cases.
So I don't know where we are at time. I can't believe it's an hour, but I'm wondering, because I think this got turned on long before we got here, but I'm wondering, we have people and anybody has any questions, they could type them in the chat, or thoughts, or anything anybody else wants to share. And I wonder, so kind of connecting it, with the process. Can you talk a little bit about, from the home visit to the themes, the interviews, and talk about flow a little bit, and what seems to be the most powerful piece for you? Or
I think the most powerful piece was being able to bring the group of people who had, and we've done this with other people, but in Kyle's case in particular, bringing that group of people together who had his best interest in walking through, and I know I told you guys this before, but walking through that vocational themes mapping, we started with, the big, like the big bulletin board sorts of stuff you can stick on the wall. And I really like that method because then you can, you're putting up personal attributes. You're talking to the group, you're talking to Kyle, you're talking to whoever you're working with, and you're beginning to write these things out. And you see how it flows and develops, because you leave it. And I know I've sent you some pictures of some of these things and how, how it gets to the end, how it gets to discovery activities. And I think for at least my experience, that's one of the most powerful things.
Cool. Russell, what do you got? Anything else?
I could keep
just
talking,
yeah, keep it going. I mean, you kind of touched on it before, but one of the things, and I hope I'm not retreading, but so one of the things that I think that that customized employment offers us is kind of maybe a language or a process, a methodology, just to take the next step. That I think that sometimes, based on people's work experiences and histories, I think before customized employment, like I said, for it to be useful, like we didn't know what to do. We that feeling of being stuck, of like, I don't know. And then we just spend a lot of time dancing around people and blaming them, for anything that didn't work. I guess I just wanted to, what I have found, I've said this in trainings this week, that it does seem that what I think discovery gives you a method, a way to I think to understand, or to organize information, which before discovery, before the process, it's chaos, it's all over the place, and I view it a lot with or in terms of getting to know somebody, they're just not known, and how do you get the stuff? How do you get the information? And a lot of traditional approaches, which I think are a bit more formulaic and predictive, like 1 + 2 = 3, right? I just think that people who have training as an artist, or a musician, writer, people that create stuff, I think for a living, I think that there's something about that training, I think that fits really well with discovery. And it's not like you to become trained as a musician. I mean, you start with learning chords or learning note, right? I mean, it's like you learn the basics first, but then when you're creating something, you're kind of, you're taking chaos and making order out of it, if that makes sense. And you're not scared of that.
Complete sense.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes for those of us like me, I'm not that creative, and that predictability, that like when you go to a business and say, "Hi, are you hiring?" That there's something comforting and knowing that they're going to either say yes or no. That predictability. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that, like when we want to go talk to businesses and have maybe more like wide ranging and unpredictable conversations, that can be scary to people.
You're right on with that. I think that is scary for people because, a lot of people want to have that 30-second script. Not that there's anything wrong with the 30-second script, but they don't know how to, they don't know how to go outside of that if they're given something they're not familiar with,
So I guess, and that to me would be like Corey was saying, like improvisation.
Yeah.
And you say, is jazz, you like jazz? That's you
yeah.
Okay. So obviously, it fits right into So I guess any thoughts on from a jazz musician's perspective? We could do a whole nother topic, customize employment as jazz.
Yes.
Like any perspective?
I'll tell you what. The genre, and just understanding and growing up with it. My dad was a big jazz fan. Playing bass is one of those things too. It's not a lead instrument. It's the conduit between a melodic instrument and drums. So you're playing a support role in most cases with it. But the cool thing about jazz is the improv, is the listening. And you'll if you ever talk to any jazz musicians, one of the things that they always crave is other musicians who listen. So if one of the musicians is bringing up, is increasing their volume or something like that, you go with them. If they're bringing it down, you go with them. There's always a chance for somebody to solo. Let them solo. Support them in their solo. Keep moving that along. And then when they're done soloing, they're going to let you know they're done soloing, but you got to pick up on it. So it is. I agree that I think that for me, it helps me. It helps me to go into almost any situation pretty much fearless. And I can take, like in your training, that rejection training. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. I can be rejected. I can also work something out of that rejection. and then knowing where and how to kind of take a conversation. So
That's
helps.
beautiful. I think we need to, somebody needs to look into that a bit more, because I think that's beautiful. This idea of your conduit, depending on what you're playing, and that's kind of what Discovery is, right? I mean, we're trying to connect people, connect people's skills with business needs ultimately, and you're pulling it together. You know, you've got to, and it's not verbal. I mean, you've got to know when to follow. You know, maybe when to lead, when it's your solo time, and that's pretty cool. And listening, I think ultimately that's the skill we all talk about, that we're just not, you know, being in tune with other people and kind of listening to people. I think that's cool. I think that's something we need to look into a lot more.
It is a lot of listening. And like I said, musicians, primarily jazz, but one of the big things you'll hear from, great jazz musicians is, God, listen, just listen. And the other thing is, if you don't have something to say, don't say anything. That's Thelonious Monk.
Yeah.
If you don't have anything to say, don't talk.
Yeah. Nice. And let me finish with this, that I was working in a state, I was working in California years ago, and I was struggling with some people. They really wanted everything to be linear, right? And I was trying to figure out, how do you not make that linear? And Kerry Griffin, our other mentor, said, go to a jazz club and start learning about improv. So I went to a couple jazz clubs, right? And I paid for it, stayed in California and paid for it. But I figured out it was people that can improvise. So Kerry hired the director of the drama department from the University of Montana, and we did our annual Best Go West in Idaho. And it was about probably 3 of the funnest hours of not only my career, but my life. We got acting lessons, and people to this day, a couple of friends, we sat there and we got acting lessons for 3 hours. And I called this right. And the first one was, go to the middle of the circle and be an idiot. So I walked the middle of the circle and went, and we got acting lessons. And there were people in that group who were kind of, wanting to be linear and scared of taking risks. And I swear to God, they went through a personated transplant in like 3 hours, Yeah. So we're at hour and 10 minutes here, and we have no one's put anything in the chat box. I don't know if that's good, bad, or ugly. But I'm having a good time. So anybody, Patty, anybody, I just want to make sure that our chat box works. If somebody wants to just say, hey ho, any thoughts for the good of the order, because we're going to end this in a bit. Anybody?
We have just want to say we started late, so we have some time.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But any questions, comments, concerns? Unfortunately, all the people in the chat box say, I see somebody from San Diego. But I don't think I know a lot of the people that I currently work with are on today. But if anybody has any thoughts, they want to share a story, they want to get involved, they want to tell us we're crazy, it's all good. But I'm sure, Patty, you just want to put in there, Patty's still on the call, you just put, yep, we're here. But I didn't want, it's Friday afternoon. I'm having a good time, but we'll give it like another 2 minutes. But if there's nothing else, I think we'll call it for the good of the order. And Sean, you and I, we need to talk, because my wife wants to play golf and I want to do fishing. So we got to get rid of this COVID thing, and hopefully we're supposed to be at the rendezvous this year. We can
rendezvous somewhere in Pennsylvania, do some fishing and golfing. That would be great.
That would be good. All right, folks. Well, thank you for your time, everybody. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks,
Dal. Thank you all.
Thanks, Sean. I really appreciate it.
Take care, everybody in the guest list.
Thanks, Russell. Have a good one.
See y'all.
You too.